During boarding, the flight attendant leaned in and whispered, "Pretend you're sick and get off the plane." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but then 20 minutes later she returned and said, "Please, I beg you." Have you ever had a whisper from a complete stranger save your life? Because that's exactly what happened to me, just moments before my own son and daughter-in-law tried to make me disappear at 30,000 feet. It's a story about betrayal, about the cold calculations of greed, and about how a lifetime of teaching history prepared me for the fight of my life. It all started subtly, like a chill creeping into your bones. I was sitting at my desk, the afternoon light slanting through my study window, grading old history papers I'd kept for years. Call it nostalgia, or the stubborn hope that my teaching days still mattered. My house, usually a quiet sanctuary, had felt different for the last 8 months. My son, Christopher, and his wife, Edith, had moved in. But they moved like ghosts, barely acknowledging my existence, until that day. I heard the front door open downstairs, then their footsteps on the stairs, and my shoulders instantly tensed. Edith appeared first in my doorway, Christopher behind her, hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes avoiding mine. "Francis," Edith said, her voice sickly sweet, the kind that always precedes truly awful news, "we need to talk." I removed my reading glasses slowly, a small, defensive gesture I'd perfected over 40 years of dealing with difficult students. "About what?" Christopher shifted his weight. "We've been thinking about family, about how we should spend more time together." "Quality time," Edith added, sashaying into my study like she owned the place, perching on the arm of my favorite reading chair. "Before life gets too busy." "Before what, exactly?" I kept my voice flat, but my historian's mind was already cataloging inconsistencies. They'd avoided me for months. Why this sudden change? Edith waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you know how it is. Christopher, tell him about Miami." My son finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was raw desperation, thinly masked by forced enthusiasm. "Miami, Dad. Remember when we went when I was 12? Let's recreate those memories. A whole week together, fully paid. Our treat." I slowly, deliberately, set down my pen. "You hated that trip. Said it was boring. Wanted to come home early." Christopher's smile faltered. "I was a kid. I see things differently now." The silence stretched, heavy and cold. I studied them both. My son, who once brought me dandelions and called me his hero, and this woman who'd somehow convinced him that his elderly father was just an obstacle taking up space. Something had shifted between us, a slow, corrosive erosion of respect and love. I just couldn't pinpoint when. Was it when Christopher lost his job? When their debts started piling up? When would this trip be? I asked, my voice calm despite the churning in my gut. "Next week." Edith's response came too quickly. "Everything's arranged. We just need your yes." That evening, Edith insisted on cooking dinner. She never cooked. I sat at the dining room table while she moved around my kitchen with unsettling familiarity. Christopher poured wine with excessive care, his hands trembling slightly when I asked, "So, this was planned without consulting me?" "We wanted it to be a surprise," Christopher said, avoiding my gaze. "A good surprise." Edith placed a plate before me, her movements precise, clinical. She'd worked in medical administration for years, and that cold efficiency showed in everything she did. "Francis, your life insurance policy is quite substantial. 500,000, right? Very responsible planning on your part." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "How do you know the amount?" "Christopher mentioned it once," she said, cutting her chicken into perfect, uniform pieces. "Just conversation." I looked at my son. He was focused intently on his plate, refusing to meet my gaze. The mention of my insurance felt wrong. Horribly wrong. It was timed perfectly, placed into casual dinner talk where it simply did not belong. "I haven't been sleeping well lately," I said, testing them. "My heart feels strange sometimes. Flutter-like." Christopher's eyes lit up for a split second before he caught himself. You should see a doctor. Have you seen a doctor? Christopher worries too much, Edith cut him off smoothly. You look fine, Francis. Probably just stress. They locked eyes then, just for a moment. But I caught it. Something passed between them, unspoken and knowing. My chest tightened, but not from any heart condition. After dinner, while they retreated to their bedroom downstairs, I found printed flight confirmations on the table. Already booked. My ticket, already purchased for next Tuesday. They'd been so certain I'd agree, so certain they'd made irreversible plans. I sat alone in my study long after midnight, holding an old photograph of Christopher at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, hugging my neck like I was the safest place in the world. That boy had become the man downstairs. Plotting something I couldn't quite name but felt in my bones. 40 years teaching history had taught me one thing: people leave evidence, always. Patterns emerge. Motivations become clear when you step back and observe the whole picture, not just isolated incidents. The sudden generosity, the insurance comment, those synchronized glances, the pre-purchased tickets. Morning came with pale light, and the decision I'd already made in darkness. I would go to Miami. I would watch them carefully. I would gather evidence the way I'd taught my students to examine primary sources, with skepticism and an attention to detail. Christopher knocked on my door at 7, his smile too bright for the early hour. So, Dad, Miami. What do you say? I'll go, I told him, watching his face. Relief flooded his features, followed by something else I couldn't quite identify. Satisfaction. Anticipation. Great. That's wonderful. He gripped the door frame. You won't regret it. Edith appeared behind him, her nod almost imperceptible. They'd won this round, or so they thought. I spent that morning packing my suitcase with methodical care. Underwear, shirts, my medication bottles. I paused over those bottles, reading the labels as Edith's words echoed in my mind. Something about health. About my appearance. About not worrying. My hands moved almost on their own, placing the medications in my carry-on instead of the checked luggage. A small act of caution, nothing more. But my training had taught me that survival often depended on small acts. Minor precautions that seemed paranoid until they saved your life. The suitcase closed with a decisive click. Miami awaited, and whatever they had planned, I'd be ready. Christopher's car smelled of stale coffee and synthetic air freshener. I sat in the passenger seat with my suitcase balanced on my lap because he'd claimed the trunk was too full, though I'd seen it was nearly empty when he'd opened it. The weight pressed against my thighs as we merged onto the highway toward Orlando International Airport. Neither of them spoke. Christopher gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Edith stared out her window, phone in hand. Typing rapidly, deleting messages immediately after sending them. I watched her reflection in the side mirror. Her face held that clinical blankness I'd come to recognize as her thinking expression, calculating variables, probabilities. Excited about Miami, Dad? Christopher's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Should I be? I replied. He missed the implication entirely. Of course. Family time. Beaches. Relaxation, right? The silence resumed, heavier now. I watched familiar Orlando streets slide past, the strip mall where I'd bought Christopher his first bicycle, the library where I'd spent countless Saturdays, the high school where I'd shaped young minds for 3 decades. Each block increased the pressure in my chest, the sense that I was being carried towards something irreversible. The airport appeared ahead, all concrete and glass and controlled chaos. Christopher parked in short term, another oddity. We'd be gone a week, yet he chose the most expensive option. Small details. But they accumulated like evidence in a case I was building against my own family. Security checkpoint arrived too quickly. Edith insisted I go through first, her hand firm on my shoulder, guiding me forward. I placed my carry-on on the conveyor belt, watching her watch the screen as my belongings passed through. She leaned forward slightly, checking something, then relaxed when the bag emerged on the other side. "See, easy," she said, but her relief seemed disproportionate to the simple act of airport security. At the gate, Christopher and Edith boarded immediately with Zone 1, while my ticket relegated me to Zone 3. They disappeared down the jetway without looking back, leaving me standing among strangers, my suitcase handle digging into my palm. When my zone was finally called, I walked slowly, aware of the finality of each step. The jetway stretched ahead, that peculiar, liminal space between solid ground and a metal tube suspended in nothing. The aircraft door yawned open, recycled air washing over me, carrying that distinct airplane smell of cleaning chemicals and thousands of previous passengers. I stepped inside, searching for my seat number when a flight attendant approached. Her name tag read, Mildred. Her face held professional pleasantness until she leaned close, pretending to check my boarding pass. "Pretend you're feeling ill and leave this aircraft." The words came out as an urgent whisper, her breath warm against my ear. I froze, my hand tightening on my carry-on. "Excuse me? I don't understand." But she'd already moved away, tending to overhead bins, smiling at other passengers. I stood in the aisle, confused, looking between her retreating form and Christopher and Edith in their seats 3 rows ahead. They hadn't noticed the exchange, too focused on their phones. Was this a joke? Some bizarre safety protocol? I took another step toward my row when Mildred returned, her professional mask cracking. Her hands trembled as she touched my elbow. "Sir, I'm begging you. You need to get off this plane now." I looked into her eyes then and saw genuine terror. Not concern, not confusion. Terror. The kind that comes from knowing something specific and horrible. My decades of reading students' faces, of distinguishing truth from lies, kicked in. This woman was serious. "You're serious?" I said quietly. "I've never been more serious in my life." Her fingers dug into my sleeve. "Please trust me." "Dad. Everything okay?" Christopher's voice carried down the aisle, sharp with something that wasn't quite concern. I made the decision in a heartbeat, operating on pure instinct. My hand moved to my chest, fingers splaying over my shirt. My chest. The words came out strangled, convincing because the fear was real, even if the symptom was manufactured. I stumbled, dropping to one knee in the narrow aisle. The performance came naturally, aided by the genuine terror coursing through my veins. Immediate reaction. Flight crew surrounded me, voices overlapping in professional crisis mode. "Sir, can you breathe? Sir, stay with us." Hands under my arms, lifting, supporting. A wheelchair was called. I let them help me, but kept my eyes sharp, observant. The sick old man act didn't extend to my awareness. Through the commotion, I caught Christopher and Edith's faces. That's what I remember most clearly. Not concern. Not worry. But disappointment. Pure, undisguised disappointment. Before their masks slammed back into place and they performed concern for the audience around them. Christopher stood from his seat, the movement aggressive before he softened it, making himself the worried son. "Dad, what's wrong? Should we come with you?" No, stay seated, everyone." A crew member blocked the aisle. "Wheel. Take care of him. Medical personnel are standing by." As they wheeled me backward down the jetway, I heard Edith's voice, low and meant only for Christopher, but carrying just enough in the quiet after crisis. "This ruins everything." Christopher's hissed response, "Not here. Not now." The wheelchair carried me back through the jetway, back into the terminal, back to solid ground. My phone buzzed in my pocket as they settled me in the medical area. A text from Christopher, "Dad, hope you feel better. We'll call when we land." I watched through the window as the aircraft pushed back from the gate, as it began its slow taxi toward the runway. Christopher and Edith were aboard that plane, growing smaller and more distant with each passing second. The physical separation felt absolute, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and could never return to the innocence of not knowing. The plane disappeared from view, just another metal speck against a blue sky. Mr. Wilson. I turned. Mildred stood there, still in her uniform, but off-duty now, her face pale and drawn. She glanced around the medical area, checking for listeners. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Somewhere private." The medical room was small and windowless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead with that persistent electrical hum that sets teeth on edge. A paramedic had just cleared me, vitals are fine, probably anxiety, and left me alone on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath me every time I shifted. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see the tail of my flight disappearing into clouds, carrying my son and daughter-in-law toward Miami while I sat here in this sterile room, heart-pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with medical issues. My phone buzzed. Christopher's third text, "Dad, please respond. We're worried sick." I powered it off. The door opened. Mildred entered, still in her uniform, but her professional composure had cracked like old porcelain. She closed the door firmly, checked the hallway through the window once, then turned to face me. Her hands shook. "I need to show you something." Her voice trembled. "What I'm about to do could cost me my job, but I can't let this happen." I straightened on the table, paper rustling. "Show me." She pulled out her phone with fingers that couldn't quite stay steady, unlocked it, navigated to her video library. I recorded part of a phone call in the restroom before boarding. She paused, meeting my eyes. "Your daughter-in-law's call." The phone screen showed a bathroom stall, mostly ceiling tiles and fluorescent lighting. The audio was muffled, but voices carried through the echo of tile and porcelain. Edith's voice was unmistakable in its clinical precision. "The pills will dissolve quickly in his drink. He won't taste anything." A pause. "Altitude makes heart attacks more plausible. Emergency at 30,000 feet. Medical response limited. Investigation harder." Another pause. Then, 500,000. Christopher's nervous but committed. She laughed. Actually laughed. I watched the video once, twice, 3 times. Each viewing revealed new layers of horror. My daughter-in-law discussing my death like a business transaction, weighing logistics and timing, calculating profit margins on my life. Who was she talking to? My voice came out steady, surprisingly so. "I don't know." Mildred lowered the phone, but she mentioned the plan being in motion and Christopher being on board. Those were her exact words. I looked at her directly. "Why did you do this? Risk your career for a stranger?" Something flickered across her face. Old pain. Barely healed wounds. My father, 3 years ago, his nephew convinced him to change his will. Then he fell downstairs. They ruled it an accident. Her jaw tightened. I couldn't prove anything. The regret has eaten at me ever since. When I heard that conversation, heard her plotting, I couldn't stay silent again. "I'm sorry about your father." "Don't be sorry," her voice hardened. "Stop them." I took her contact information in my small notebook, the one I always carried out of teacher habit. Precise, careful letters, even in crisis. Documentation instinct prevailed. We exchanged phone numbers. She promised to preserve the recording, understood it might become legal evidence. We shook hands. Her grip was firm despite the trembling, and she left to catch her next flight rotation. The taxi ride home took 40 minutes through Orlando's suburbs, past strip malls and chain restaurants and residential developments that all looked identical. The driver tried making conversation. "Mr. Flight, no?" I stared out the window. I caught something more important. He fell silent, confused, but sensing I didn't want to elaborate. My house appeared ahead, a 2-story colonial with the garden I'd maintained for 30 years. Christopher's car wasn't in the driveway. They were in Miami, wondering why their plan had failed, scrambling to adjust. I paid the driver, walked up the path, unlocked my own front door. The house felt different now, violated, knowing what had been plotted within these walls, discussed at my own dining table, planned in bedrooms down the hall. I set my carry-on by the stairs and went straight to my study. The filing cabinet held decades of documentation, insurance policies, bank statements, legal papers, property deeds. I spread everything across the dining room table, creating a systematic layout, chronological order, categorized by type. A teacher's methodology applied to my own survival. Hours passed. The light outside faded to dusk, then darkness. I put on my reading glasses, examined each document under good lighting, looking for inconsistencies, signs of tampering, evidence of the conspiracy Mildred had exposed. I found it. The life insurance beneficiary form, dated 6 months ago, changing the primary beneficiary from my niece in Atlanta to Christopher Wilson. The signature at the bottom attempted to mimic my handwriting but failed. The capital F in Francis was wrong, too elaborate. I never made that flourish. I photographed the document with my phone. Evidence preservation. More digging revealed additional horrors. Bank account statements showing transfers I'd never authorized. $38,000 over 6 months, siphoned in amounts small enough to escape casual notice. A power of attorney document granting. Christopher Financial Authority, signed with my forged name. Medical records I'd never seen, documenting cognitive decline I'd never experienced. They'd been building a paper trail of my incompetence while I taught night classes at the community center, graded papers, lived my normal life, creating the fiction of a failing mind to justify their control, to explain away my death as a natural consequence of deteriorating health. Evidence. Timeline. Motive. Method. I spoke aloud to the empty room, old teaching habit resurfacing. They planned this for months. Months. Living in my house, eating my food, plotting my murder. I held up the forged power of attorney, staring at the signature that wasn't mine. This wasn't impulsive. This was systematic, planned, sophisticated. They'd researched, prepared, established legal groundwork for theft and murder, both. The documents remained spread across my dining table. I didn't clean them up, couldn't. They represented physical proof of betrayal, tangible evidence of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. I sat in my reading chair as midnight approached, the house silent around me. My son was in Miami, probably reassuring Edith that they'd find another opportunity, another method. They didn't know I had the recording. Didn't know I'd found their forged documents. Didn't know the prey had become aware of the hunters. My hands rested on the chair arms, steady now. The shock had burned away, replaced by something colder, more focused. They didn't just try to kill me. They'd been stealing my life, piece by piece, for months, erasing my autonomy, building toward my erasure. Time to take it back. 3 days had passed since I discovered the forged documents. 3 days of avoiding Christopher and Edith's concerned questions, deflecting their attention with vague mentions of stomach trouble from the airport incident. 3 days of research, reading attorney reviews, making discreet calls, organizing evidence into color-coded folders that now sat in neat stacks on my desk. Nicholas Clark arrived precisely at 2 o'clock as scheduled. Mid-50s, gray threading through his dark hair, an expensive briefcase that spoke of successful practice. A state law specialist with 20 years' experience. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Wilson, thank you for trusting me with this." He settled into the chair across from my desk, opened his briefcase, pulled out a laptop and legal pad. "Walk me through what you found." I slid the first folder across the desk. Blue tab, financial documents. Nicholas's professional composure held through the first few pages, then began cracking as the scope revealed itself. Forged signatures. Altered beneficiaries. Fraudulent power of attorney. His fingers moved faster, flipping pages, cross-referencing dates, building a timeline. When did you last review these documents personally? His pen hovered over the legal pad. The insurance policy. 5 years ago, when I retired from teaching. And you never authorized any beneficiary changes? Never. My voice was steady, firm. That policy was meant for my niece in Atlanta. She put herself through nursing school. I wanted her to have something. Nicholas made notes, his writing quick and precise. Your daughter-in-law, Edith Wilson. What's her professional background? Medical administrator. Silver Palms Medical Center. Administrative access to patient records, document templates, physician's signature stamps. Understanding dawned in his eyes. She created your medical history, made you incompetent on paper? While I was teaching night classes at the community center twice a week, I almost smiled at the irony. Lecturing on civil rights history while being declared cognitively declined in fraudulent medical reports. Nicholas opened his laptop, began running forensic accounting software on my bank records. I'd provided account access authorization earlier. Red flags appeared immediately on the screen, highlighted in crimson: unauthorized transfers, signature discrepancies, pattern matching typical fraud indicators. His expression grew grimmer with each discovery. $38,000 over 6 months, he said quietly. Systematic theft. Small amounts initially, then growing bolder. Classic embezzlement pattern. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out Christopher's laptop. He left this in his room. I know his passwords. Set up the computer for him years ago. He never changed them. Nicholas glanced up, something flickering in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, of the ethical line I'd crossed, but he took the laptop, connected an external drive, began data recovery procedures. Within minutes, deleted emails resurrected themselves on the screen. The conspiracy unfolded in digital form. Email chains between Christopher and someone calling himself a medical consultant. Discussions of substances causing heart failure, untraceable in a standard autopsy, particularly effective at high altitude. Price negotiated. $10,000 for consultation and supply. Meeting arranged at a parking garage in downtown Orlando. Nicholas's jaw tightened as he read. This is a murder contract. Your son negotiated your death like he was buying a used car. The words should have hurt more than they did. But I'd burned through pain during those 3 days of documentation. Reached a colder place beyond conventional grief. Keep reading, I said. There's more. He found the draft will on Christopher's desktop. Everything left to Christopher and Edith Wilson. My signature forged at the bottom. Dated 2 weeks ago. They'd planned to discover it after my death, present it to probate court, claim I changed my mind about my niece. Nicholas leaned back, removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. When he looked at me again, his professional mask had dropped entirely. Francis, may I call you Francis? I nodded. This goes beyond estate fraud. This is conspiracy to commit murder, forgery, elder abuse, financial exploitation. Criminal charges, not just civil recovery. He paused. We need to decide. Bring in police now, or build an ironclad case first. My phone buzzed on the desk between us. Christopher's text lit up the screen. Dad, where are you? We need to talk about your health. Nicholas glanced at the phone, then at me. Understanding passed between us wordlessly. The manipulation continued. Even now, pressure applied to keep me confused and compliant. Build the case first, I said. Make it undeniable. Then we strike. He nodded slowly, respect evident in his expression. You've thought about this. I taught strategy through history for 40 years. Sun Tzu. Machiavelli. Napoleon. I met his eyes. I learned from the best. Know your enemy. Choose your battlefield. They're going to realize you know, Nicholas warned. When I file protective orders, block accounts, revoke fraudulent documents, they'll know. Good. My hands rested flat on the desk, steady and calm. Let them panic. Panicked people make mistakes. A slight smile crossed his face. All right, then. Here's what we do. He spent the next hour outlining strategy, calls to contacts, a document examiner for signature analysis, a forensic accountant for a detailed audit, a private investigator for background on the medical consultant. He photographed evidence with a high-resolution camera, created digital backups, uploaded everything to encrypted cloud storage. 3 evidence packets, he explained, printing documents and organizing them into folders. 1 for eventual police involvement, 1 for civil proceedings, 1 for you to keep secure off-site. Safe deposit box, not your house. I nodded, absorbing everything. Student mode engaged, learning the machinery of legal warfare. As afternoon faded toward evening, Nicholas gathered his materials, packed his briefcase with methodical care. At my study door, he paused and turned back. Francis, one question. When this is over, what do you want? Justice, or revenge? I didn't hesitate. I want them to understand what they've done. I want consequences that last. He considered this, then nodded. Don't change anything yet. Act normal. I'll handle protective orders. Account freezes through legal channels. Give me 1 week. After he left, I sat in the darkening study, listening to the house settle around me. My phone buzzed again. Christopher. Dad, dinner tonight? We need to talk about your future. I stared at the text, then typed my response. Yes, we need to talk about the future. The double meaning was clear to me, opaque to him. The hunter had become the hunted, though he didn't know it yet. I pressed send. 1 week. 1 week had passed since Nicholas Clark left my study with his briefcase full of evidence and his timeline for legal strikes. 7 days of performance, of playing the confused old man while executing strategy with the precision I'd once applied to lesson planning. I sat at my breakfast table, coffee growing cold in its mug, watching Christopher and Edith through the kitchen doorway. They'd just returned from work. Christopher's tie loosened, Edith's professional mask firmly in place. Neither of them knew that while I'd shuffled around the house asking which pills to take and where I'd left my reading glasses, I'd been methodically destroying the foundation of their conspiracy. Dad? Christopher appeared in the doorway. You okay? You've been staring at that coffee for 10 minutes. I blinked slowly, perfecting the vacant look. Have I? I was just thinking about something. What was I thinking about? I shook my head, confused. It's gone now. The glance they exchanged was triumphant. I watched it happen. Watched them see what they wanted to see. Deterioration. Decline. The mental incompetence their forged documents claimed. What they didn't see was the security camera above the refrigerator, recording every micro-expression, every satisfied smirk. The cameras had been installed 3 days ago, 12 of them throughout the house. I'd called a legitimate security company, explained I'd been forgetting to lock doors and worried about break-ins. Christopher and Edith had approved enthusiastically. For your safety, Dad, Christopher had said. That's really smart thinking. They hadn't examined the specifications closely. Hadn't realized the cameras recorded audio. Hadn't understood that every private conversation, every whispered plan, every moment they thought themselves alone was being captured and uploaded to cloud storage that only I could access. 24/7 recording, sir. Complete coverage. Even sound. Even sound, I'd repeated, playing up the elderly confusion. Audio on all cameras. Yes, sir. Crystal clear. Christopher had interjected then, concern crossing his face. Dad, isn't that expensive? My safety is worth it. I'd waved dismissively. I've been so forgetful lately.